Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Chasing Collectibles Catchup. I'm Tyler, and we are fast approaching Nerd Fest, which is going to be on October 11th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Sullivan Middle School in Rock Hill. And in the lead up to that, we're going to have a bunch of guests on the show that are artists and vendors and all the things that will be at the show. And we're super excited today to have Chris McJunkin, who is an artist and has been all around the Carolinas comic book circuit and has done a lot of great work and has been featured by Marvel and done other uh, comic book publishing. So, Chris, thank you for joining us.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, Tyler.
Thank you. And so I thought we'd just start at the beginning. How'd you first get into doing art?
Well, like as a kid, we had we grew up in Darlington. I live in Florence, South Carolina now,
Okay.
and down the road from us was a little gas station called Spring Mart, and it was run by an older couple that they had I'm assuming, a 20-year-oldish son, and he would buy comics, and they had a spinner rack in there, and they would resell like his used comics three for $1. And so like just the place was maybe a quarter of a mile from my parents' house, and we just walked down the road, go there. I mean, this was 1985. We go down there, buy some candy, get some comics,
Right.
and like so that was kind of how I got introduced to comics and fell in love with them. My dad was very much into art when I was
Mhm.
when I was young. He does more like photography and stuff now, but he used to do a lot more drawing, painting. He was a huge fan of like fantasy art, Frank Frazetta. Like
Yeah.
I remember hearing about Frank Frazetta like when I was really young, and my dad showed me some of his work and just being blown away by it.
Mhm.
But we would go, we buy comics, and my dad would sit around and sketch with us, and like it was funny because yeah, I was born in '80, um, and so like the Dark Knight Returns came out, Frank Miller,
Right. Yeah.
and like over at the public library in the kids section, they actually had the Dark Knight Returns, even though it was very much not a
And
kid's book,
I was going to say in the
but
kids section.
yeah, it was literally in the kids fiction section. And so like I found this book and it just blew my mind. Like this was totally different from any other comic I've ever seen. And like I just remember like the fight with the Joker in the Tunnel of Love,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
like I remember sitting there like with a little 8.5 by 11 paper, like redrawing then like
Yeah.
the entire like last chapter of the
Mhm.
book, like doing my best to, like trying to eat Frank Miller and whatnot. And but yeah, I mean, I just always, which I mean, pretty much most kids enjoy drawing to some
Yeah.
degree as kids, and then they kind of grow out of it, they get other hobbies and whatnot. Like most, my brother and my friends all like went on to love video games,
Yeah.
but that was their thing that they enjoyed doing, and me, I just like I could just sit there and I would reread the same comics I had over and over. And like, I'd be trying to draw what I saw in those comics, and it's just I love that, sequential format, the storytelling, the different art styles, the and like yeah, I mean it just grabbed hold of me, and pretty much like I just knew even as a small kid that's what I wanted to do, like one
Right.
day, like so gosh, it must have been, so the Tim Burton Batman came out in '89. Around then, we discovered over here in Florence, where we live now, that there was actually a comic book store, and back in late '80s, there like especially where I live, there really weren't any of those, so I was like, oh well, this is amazing. There's an entire place you can go that's just comic books,
Right. Yeah.
Like I think my first time going in there, I was just like, yep, I am 100%,
Yeah. Kid in the candy
like
shop sort of deal.
oh yeah, yeah, 100%. And like, I mean, I remember at Spring Mart where I was buying those comics three for $1. I would buy whatever they had, like so. I read a lot of the Firestorm from DC, that like 100 issue run, because it was just this guy's personal collection that he was reselling. Captain Atom, I was reading a lot of. I remember my first exposure to Tom McFarlane was, I think, Amazing Spider-Man 321. It was an assassination plot with Paladin on the cover, but they actually had that book on the three for $1 spinner
Oh,
rack,
nice.
and that was the first time I ever saw McFarlane's art. I was just like, "This is the most amazing thing I've ever seen." It was just so different, and like I remember some of the other books, like I think some of the Eric Larson stuff, some of his early Marvel stuff they had on those. on those racks. And I mean, all of those guys who went on to like form Image in the early '90s, Jim Lee, Todd McFarlane, Eric Larson, they were all just like hugely influential on me. Like
Right.
reading their stuff at Marvel because I was buying the Marvel stuff when all the adjective list Spider-Man came out, the Jim Lee X-Men #1 came out, and like it was just amazing.
Yeah.
And
I was looking over your your Instagram, your website before this. I like to do my research,
oh
and
yeah,
a lot of your stuff. I mean, the people you're listing off, I feel like I can see some of the influence in you. Some of your
oh
I was looking at some of your Batman stuff. You can see some of the like I see some like Miller-esque vibes.
oh
Some of your
definitely.
Spider-Man, I can see some of that. McFarlane.
No, yeah. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I was talking with my writer, Aaron, one time, and Aaron's like, oh, yeah, I can see Aaron Larson's influence all over your stuff. Like whatever.
right.
Like I've drawn the sequential. I was like, yeah, I mean, I've spent the last 30 years reading, I mean, because he's been doing Savage Dragon since '93. So I guess 32 years, plus the previous stuff from his DC and Marvel stuff leading up, to Savage Dragon. And, but yeah, like, yeah, all of those guys. And then later, Mike Mignola with Hellboy. I think that came out like '93, '94. Then Mike Allred with Madman. That was one of my favorite ones too. Uh, but yeah, yeah, those are all like huge influences
Yeah.
on me.
So do you have any characters that you feel like you like drawing the most? I know like your I saw a couple like your Venom. Venom looked really cool because I like it's
Venom,
just you
Venom
can have
is
a lot of
my
fun with Venom, I
yeah,
feel like.
Venom's 100% always my go-to because there's no one way you have to draw Venom. And I kind of bounce around a little bit and like the way I draw. Like I got the darker stuff, I got cartoonier stuff, it kind of depends on the desired effect or the mood that day.
Mhm.
But like Venom is just he's a big gross monster, so
Right.
which is like just right up my alley of of like type of fun stuff to draw. Like one of my favorite comics in the last 20 years was Invincible.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Ryan Otley's just the best when it just comes to drawing like hyper, violent,
Yeah, yeah.
gross action stuff. You can tell he really, really enjoys it.
Yeah. You can I mean
So,
I've seen that and I love the show, but I feel like even the show doesn't do justice to how like I mean gruesome even just looking at the panels on the
yeah,
comic feels.
yeah,
I mean it's
like honestly, Ryan Otley's in his own league when it comes to way he can the emotions he can get from you from just like like man
yeah.
that was a lot. Well, me and my writer Aaron were actually talking about that and uh, like a conversation we were having where I was basically saying like I found it funny that Robert Kirkman also very famous for doing Walking Dead, which is a horror comic. The violence in Walking Dead does not come close to touching a
Yeah.
candle to what which I mean is also black and white versus color, which Invisible was in all that gory color and whatnot, but yeah, so
It is cool like with the comic medium like obviously it's the pairing between like you see the dialogue you see narration and all that but it's really impressive to see like what an artist can do to bring that to life. I mean there's
oh
times where like you're not even seeing it, there's no dialogue, there's no narration, it's just the art, and what you can get
yeah.
across with just art by itself is really amazing.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I mean that's a big reason why I love comics is it's just this perfect blend of storytelling.
Yeah.
Of the writer, they have the words, the artist interprets them, just the whole sequential aspect of how every different artist is going to interpret, internalize, and lay out a page different from each other. So it's all very unique. And I mean like when I discovered Magnolia with Hellboy, which I bought some of Magnolia's work when he was at Marvel, but like what he could convey, like in this panel layout, in the shadows, the dark, just the way he could structure stuff. It was like honestly, I feel like it's a weird comparison to make, but it's almost Rosetta-esque. And the
Right.
way that Frazetta conveyed motion, I don't remember who said this, but they were like, what Frazetta did so good in conveying motion is if he was painting like Conan the Barbarian swinging an axe, right? Like Verzetta doesn't show you the back of the axe swing. He doesn't show you the end of the axe swing. He shows in the phase the mid,
Right,
that
middle point.
motion. And the way that he was able to convey motion in still images. Because there's a lot of other really great fantasy artists out there, like Boris Vigello and whatnot, And but compared to Frazetta, they all look very static and stilted and posed.
Yeah,
Frazetta just had a way of conveying that movement and that energy and that life. And I also feel like somebody like Manoia does the same thing in their storytelling. That
yeah,
they catch just the right moment, and that's something I'm always like looking for when like I'm looking at the storytelling. Is not just how well are they conveying what the writer is getting across, because I mean honestly, it's a skill just to get across that aspect of
right,
it. But the illustrators, the artists that can kind of get that perfect moment of it, that perfect like, oh, there's 20 different ways that could draw this panel, but this one way of conveying the movement or the motion or some emotion, where I'm just like, man, that's anytime I see something like that, I don't have a great example of it offhand, where I'm just like, yeah, it reminds me why I love the medium of comics so much.
right.
So
Well, and it's interesting too because comics, like it's not animation, so you can't show literally every piece of it. You've got a limited amount of time, you've got
right,
a limited amount of panels, and you've got to convey, here's a fight sequence, but I can't show every single punch. I can't, but I'm going to show you just enough for you to know, okay, this is what happened.
right.
It's
And
pretty impressive.
another great example for me of that is Jeff Smith Bone. All right. So I discovered the Jeff Smith series Bone in like 1994. So I was like 14. I loved artists like Jay Lee at the time, Simon Bisley, all these hyper dark, gritty artists and
Right.
whatnot. And then I hear about this comic Bone like through Wizard magazine, and this looks like a Disney cartoon. It's black and white. And I don't think I was really reading much. Again, I was like 14, so I was pretty much reading Image at that point. But like, I just keep hearing how great this is, and I pick up like the first trade or first few issues because they've reprinted all. They kept selling out, they reprint them, and but the way that Jess Smith could like convey so much emotion in just like a few lines, and then like
Right. Yeah.
some of the scenes where the Bone Cousins are being chased by the rat creatures, and like it's during a lightning storm. And so he's playing with like the action between the lightning strikes where a panel will be dark and then like everything's lit up from
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
bolt of
Yeah.
lightning, and you know just all these super inventive ways to get across this motion in these still images. And again, like the stuff I was reading at that time was nothing like it.
Yeah.
So again, it was kind of like when I first saw Frank Miller Dark Knight Returns, it's like, oh wow, this is a totally different way to look at comics, with the way that Jeff Smith, was approaching it. And so anytime I find something like that, I mean, a great case in point for me was when I first discovered Brian Michael Bendis's work. Mid '90s is when he was first self-publishing through Caliber, and he had a crime series called AKA Goldfish, and the follow up that was Jinx. And the very first issue I bought was, I think it was issue 2 of Jinx, and the entire issue is just two characters having a phone conversation.
Huh.
Like the main character, or Goldfish, is calls up a restaurant on the phone. He saw an attractive woman who's Jinx, the main character. He sees her in a diner, kind of like a Waffle House type of thing, and he wants to approach her, but he can't figure out how without kind of coming off like he's trying to hit on her.
Right.
So he leaves the diner and he goes down the road. He walks into a phone booth. This is before cell phones and everything. And he calls the diner up, and the waitress answers the phone. And he's like, "Yeah, there's a dark-haired woman sitting at a table writing like in a notebook." And he's like, "Can you put her on the phone?" And the waitress is like, "What? Like you want me to go like bother this person?" He's like, "Just please do it." And they proceed to have for several, like the bulk of the story is just these two characters having this philosophical conversation because he's having to explain to her, like, it's like, "Hey, I saw you in here. I wanted to approach you." And she's like, "Well, why didn't you?" He's like, "There's no way
Hmm.
I could without coming off a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but then it extrapolates and they have a whole conversation about, and he's basically pontificating about how, when you're young, you just fall into having friends, people you go to school with and whatnot.
Hmm.
And then as you age, those friends fall away, and then you become more isolated, and you don't know how to meet new people unless it's like through
Yeah.
work or something like that. Or I guess like a hobby or something. But it end up being just this super interesting like first impression of a writer, you know.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect that
And,
in a comic book. I mean,
and yeah, and especially in a comic book. And at that point, I was only buying comics for art I like, by and large. And then like I found this writer where I'm like, oh crap, this guy's writing totally different from anything I've read at that point. And like I became like an avid fan of him, he went on, work for McFarlane and then Marvel with Ultimate Spider-Man line. That Daredevil run he did with Malieve was one of my favorite things that's ever been made.
yeah,
He created Miles Morales. He brought Luke Cage back into the limelight. He created Jessica Jones. Pretty much everything from the Netflix stuff. It was like
yeah, yeah,
they should have just like backed a truck full of money up to that guy's house for like giving them all this stuff. And then later into the Spider Verse and whatnot. But yeah, I mean it was a way it restructured the way I thought about comics at the time.
right.
Like reading this comic that's just two characters having there's no punch thrown, in this comic. There's just two characters on the phone having a conversation. But it's just so well written. I was just like, huh, okay, I'm gonna go find everything that this guy's written,
Yeah,
because like I like this, it's different, And that's the thing I love is just finding something that's cool, neat, different.
right. Well, you mentioned earlier, like, you're working with a writer, and I know you're working on the Immoral Stingray right now with Second
Mm,
Thought Comics. So I guess what
right.
is that like, that relationship between an artist and writer? Is it,
Right.
how does that
Like
dynamic work?
me and Aaron Walter, we've been working together since about so I went full time with the art in 2012, and that's about the same time we started working together. He had a weekly web comic called Zero's Heroes, and the original artist who had done a few years worth of weekly strips, that guy ended up like I don't know, like he needed a replacement artist. I'm not exactly sure of what happened with the original artist Sergio, if he just got out doing comics or not. But like I started working with Aaron on that, and then like Aaron's a super like nice dude, really cool writer, and like he's got so many different ideas, and like gosh, like everything he was he was self publishing several different things with a handful of different artists and friends of his and whatnot. And but yeah, we were doing the Immoral Stingray. No, sorry, we were doing the Zero Zeros webcomic, and we did that one for probably for about a year, about 2 years or so in that format. And then we did like a standalone annual type thing that was published, that Aaron self published. And then we did some separate stuff beyond that. We did it was an anthology science fiction book called Science Hero, and it was three stories. They were all written by Aaron, and they were all drawn by different artists. I was drawing one of them. I did all the covers for it too. I think I ran 3 or 4 issues. I think he published with that, and then about 2015, he started developing. Excuse me, he started developing a Moral Stingray, and the original artist on that, I want to say Kevin Bent, but I may be misremembering off the top of my head. The original artist worked with Aaron for the first 2.5 issues, I think, and then me and another artist filled out the third issue, and then I came on the fourth issue. And from my experience, every writer I've worked with has been different. They
Right.
all have different writing styles and whatnot. But typically they have a script written out like you would expect to see.
Hmm.
Like like anybody that's ever seen like in Wizard magazine or online, like just screen grabs of a comic script. That's typical format, and I'll have all the dialogue, the character, narration. Some writers are more loose, like there's the Stan Lee method of,
Yeah.
Stan Lee would throw it to the artist and say, hey, okay, this is what happens this issue, fill out, 15 pages of fighting,
Yeah, the Marvel method.
other writers will just, write a page synopsis, and they'll
Mhm.
leave the panel structure up to, the artist to interpret as they will. Aaron typically has, the more keyed in, the panel structure. Like if it's 6 panels, so I have all 6 panels detailed out with the action and
Mhm.
dialogue for each panel and whatnot. And then, like if I have a suggestion of something, or if I feel like we can trim this down to a panel less, or we need a panel more, like he's always very open and that dialogue. And typically with him, like I'll have a four up on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, just like a little thumbnail grid that is proportional to the 11 by 17 artboard that I'm going to do the final art on. I'll basically do it's based about sketch card size, about this size. So
Okay.
like, if it's like 7 panels or whatnot, I'll just go and mock it up real quick, and basically like with stick figures, like, nothing complex, but yeah, like, just do something like that for the
Yeah.
panel placement. And then like, do like little stick figures of, guy jumping or, doing an energy blast or whatnot. And then like you've got some buildings, just, all that stuff. And then, we'll kind of go back and forth on if he has any suggestions or notes, like we'll go back and forth. Then I'll typically take it from that side, blow it up to like 8.5 by 5.5 and do like a more tightened up sketch,
Right.
of character placement. We'll make sure he's leaving enough room for dialogue if there's a lot of dialogue in the panel. Like you don't want like five figures in there, no
Yeah.
room for the dialogue. So, just and a lot of that's just trial and error, figuring it out, but yeah, I mean, it's always a fun collaborative process,
Right. I can imagine
working with
that's
the different writers. And some writers I've worked with are like really open to the back and forth. Like there was a guy I worked with, Ken Alvery. No, sorry, Kenneth Olson. Ken Alvery's an artist friend of mine. Ken Olson and me, we self-published a series called Ninja Garden, which is basically like the Olive Garden. I think Kenneth was actually working as a manager in an Olive Garden, but the idea was Ninja Garden was a restaurant staffed by ninjas who were actually superheroes. And like Kenneth was a lot of fun working with because like we could bounce ideas off of each other.
right.
Like I remember the original script he sent me for the very first, like it was like a little short story. And like I remember we went back and forth a lot, like what we ended up with, because like he was so open to that collaborative part of like suggestions and whatnot. Like we ended up with some like really fun stuff that ended up being really different, from the
Mhm.
original concept he had. And but other, it kind of depends on the job too, like sometimes you're just like, okay, cool, this is what you want, bam, like
Right.
it
Yeah.
depends on the dynamic you got and how specific of a vision the writer has or whatnot. But yeah, the Moral Stingray has been a fun project. I'm hoping we get back to it soon. We did a Kickstarter for the first issue a while back and was successful, and we got those printed up and out there and everything. And which I know Aaron's been doing some other self-publishing of like kind of autobiographical type stuff and what have you. But yeah, I'm hoping that we get back to that soon because it's a really fun comic to work on.
Yeah,
So
it looked cool. I was looking a little bit on your website. They
mm,
had a few you had a few bits of it on there. It
yeah,
looked fun.
yeah,
So it's really interesting.
yeah. And the most recent thing we did, Double Dare. This
Oh, that's
is
sweet.
I did the cover for this. This is my buddy Brian Wingrove, Bear
Hmm.
Button Comics. Brian's a great dude. I don't know if you've ever had the pleasure of meeting him. He does awesome character mashups of he calls it cartoon cosplay, and a lot of like Warner Brothers type characters mashed up with superheroes. So he has like Tasmanian Devil with Venom, or
Oh, right,
like
right, yeah, yeah,
he has Wile E. Coyote as Bob Ross, and he's like painted a tunnel like on a mountainside. But like he's got brilliant stuff. He's done like so many things I love. But anyway, this comic that he wrote, Double Dare, this is third issue, and each issue is actually a jam comic where is got several different. Like this issue has 10 artists.
okay,
My buddy Chris Bradbury did like the first few pages, and I just freaking love his work. Uh,
yeah,
and then my buddy Lyle Pollard, one of my oldest art friends, he did several pages. Uh, and then
nice.
so flip there's one of my pages there.
Okay, yeah,
And then that's one of Lyle's pages on the other side. But it's a really fun experimental type comic. It's got two stories and a couple like little backup stories. Like a bunch of different other folks. I believe this is Jay Gobble that did this spread there. But we just got these printed up a few weeks back, and yeah. So yeah, this is the most current thing that we got that we've been. We're actually most of us are going to be at Greensboro, Big Lit Comic Con next weekend. I know me,
Yeah.
Brian, Joe, and Mercedes, and a few others, and I'll have copies at the Nerdfest show as well. So, but yeah, I did cover a few of the pages. I actually did all the lettering for this, the print design and everything. So, this was a lot of work, and we were really excited with how this came about. So, and
Yeah, I definitely want to take a look at it at Nerdfest. That sounds really cool.
yeah, definitely. So,
So
but
now, well, in addition to doing your like adapting, like you're doing, you know, adapting writing and all that, you've also done like your art has been featured by Marvel a few times, like some of
yeah,
the Marvel Masterpiece editions. That's got to be pretty cool as like being a
yeah,
fan
oh
of
yeah,
like his
that
characters and
was
then
that was an awesome opportunity. The first set I worked on was in 2017, Marvel Upper Deck. I believe it was the Black Panther set that they released coinciding with the movies. Probably ended up working on about somewhere between 12 and 20 sets over the course of about 4 or 5 years, I think. So like yeah, it was like the Marvel Studios 10-year anniversary set in 2018, which was commemorating the 10 years of the MCU movie. So
yeah.
that was really fun. Like I think Spider-Man Far From Home, the second Spider-Man movie. I got to
Mhm.
work on some sketch cards for that one, Avengers Infinity War, a few of the Marvel masterpieces, and a few of the Marvel premiere, and then some of the other. I can't remember all of them, but I know I've got most of them listed on the
Yeah,
website.
so there was a lot of
Uh,
them listed on the
yeah,
site,
and then
so that's impressive.
yeah, I've also done a few for Mars Attacks, Betty Page way back in the day. I think that was actually the first sketch card thing I ever worked on. Like that was an official thing. Mars Attacks. I know I'm forgetting one that should be front of mind, but can't remember at the moment. So
Well, I was looking too at all those sketch. You've got the sketch cards, and a lot of them were like a good chunk of them at least. I saw a lot of like horror stuff too, like you had different like horror characters and all that.
oh
And with
yeah.
like upcoming like October, we're getting close to. Do you have any like horror characters that you particularly like drawing? I saw the Terrifier was on there. I saw Leprechaun
Yeah,
was on there.
yeah. I always enjoy drawing Jason and Freddy.
Mhm.
Actually, right now that they have the season finale of Alien Earth. Have you been watching that?
I've not yet, but I've heard amazing things. I've heard it's so good.
So good, so good. So before Alien Earth came out, because I wasn't a huge fan of Prometheus or Covenant. I remember I was talking to my artist friend Lyle. I was like, two things I hate when they do it in the Alien franchise. This was before the show came on. I hate it when they focus too much on the androids, like they did with David in the Prometheus movies. And I hate it when they focus on any aliens that aren't the xenomorph. All right.
Mhm.
But that's what I'm here for. I'm here for the xenomorph. Well, I spoke too soon because the show Alien Earth does both and they do it extremely well. Like that,
Right.
they introduced this little eyeball thing. They taken to call it T Oculus, I think, online. Like there's a sequence with T Oculus, the little squid eyeball looking thing in episode 4. No spoilers, dude. Honestly, it rivaled the first time I ever saw the facehugger scene from the first movie. It was
Oh dang,
just,
that's high
it was
praise.
just, it was so awesome. And as much as I love the xenomorph, I was like, all right, cool. I just want to see this thing now. This thing is awesome. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm really interested to see how it wraps up tonight. But that's actually my next piece is going to be a piece inspired by the little eyeball squid looking creature. But
Awesome. I have to introduce you. I've got a friend. She's been on the show, Lizzie Shepard. She'll be there at Nerdfest. She actually designed
yes.
the past two promo
Oh
art
yeah, that's
for.
awesome. Yeah, she has
But
awesome work.
she's really into like xenomorph. She does like horror stuff, and she's got a huge like xenomorph she's done recently. I have to show it to you. She's
Oh,
pretty
nice.
cool.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
but I know with art and all that, and this is something that like I think of her and I think of like passionately against this. So with the rise of AI, it has
Yeah.
become like a reality more and more. And I'm a social studies teacher, and so I see my students using it more and more. Not really in
Mm,
the art context, but like, oh, what does this mean? And let me fill out
mm,
my study guide using AI. I guess like, what are your overall thoughts on AI? Like, is it? I mean, hopefully, it's not going to at any point kind of replace genuine art in
no,
comics,
no.
but
My overall thoughts on AI is bump it.
mhm.
I'm totally fine with the idea of AI and like the within the realm of research. Like if they can use
Yeah.
AI in order to figure out how to cure diseases, and for automated tests, that type of
Yeah.
stuff. Like if it has a greater purpose, like the idea of using AI to make art,
Yeah.
when and like so many people smarter than me have said it. The you know the this idea of this dystopia that people are doing the manual labor while the machines are making art,
Mhm.
like it's so ridiculous you can't write it.
Yeah.
The idea
Yeah.
that which I mean, there's always been levels of volatility towards the actual artists who create art. I mean, if you look back at Marvel with Jack Kirby, I mean, like the way the company treated the artists, they treated them very disposably, like they didn't matter. And like, I mean, hell, if these companies had access to the AI tools 50 years ago, you know, like
I wouldn't use
everything would
it.
have been different because they would have
Yeah.
used that in the first instance because they didn't care about the actual people who were crafting the stuff for them. It was to
Yeah.
them a headache, unnecessary step. And like, to me, it's such a cynical thing, too,
Yeah.
and the idea that these people who refer to themselves as AI artists, which they're not, they're AI prompters. They're not
Right.
creating
You're putting in a
anything.
prompt and
Right. They're not creating anything. And I got friends and family members that mess around with the stuff, and they'll send me a picture of like, "Ugh, like look at
right.
this silly thing I made." I'm like, I don't know. Like a part of me is like, dude, if you're just using it for memes, that's like whatever. I don't care about that.
Yeah.
But there's also a resource issue of from my understanding, that it takes a lot of resources anytime AI is being used.
Yeah.
It's not like a clean energy thing going on.
Right.
So like that's another layer of terribleness going on there. But yeah, I am of course 100% against the idea of AI being used in order to make art, in order to
Right.
screw over artists. The fact that they're feeding artists work into these
Right.
machines,
Exactly.
and like without their permission, without their consent, and then they're trying to profitize. Like as far as I understand, you can't legally copyright AI, at least. Like,
Yeah.
but you do have the problem of people trying to pass off AI as their own actual work. As like
Fortunately
I'm
for
sure.
now, you can, at least for now, I think it's there. AI's art still has that look. We're like, yeah, this is AI. This you didn't make, but I think over time it might get harder and harder to tell what
Well,
is.
the reason AI has that look is because people are feeding in a specific artist work into AI a lot. Right? I
Mhm.
can't remember the guy who does a lot of Marvel covers, very popular artist. And a lot of people have since been like, "Oh man, this guy used an AI." It's like, no, AI was trained on this dude's art, and
Right.
that's
Yeah.
why his art looks so
Yeah.
much like AI, is they were actually training off of it. But yeah, no, it's like it's funny to me because like 9 times out of 10, I can spot AI a mile away.
Yeah.
I mean, aside from like the obvious tells of like too many fingers,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a polished look to AI that it there's it doesn't look natural, right?
Right. Right.
There's like, I mean, most of the AI generator prompter people, they are at least saying they're being truthful about it. There are some people that aren't, but like I remember there was like a Spawn, Todd McFarlane Spawn cover contest. Did you
Mhm.
hear about that at all?
Ah.
So this was like back in January. He had Todd McFarlane did a contest for Spawn, and the winner would have their artwork featured on the cover of Spawn. And he actually ended up selecting like 5 winners. One of the rules of the contest is you cannot use AI art, right?
Yeah. As it should be. Yeah.
Right. Well, one of the people who was selected somehow got through because his stuff was obviously AI. And when he went to his Instagram page, he has in his little bio thing at the top of Instagram that he uses Midjourney, I think it's called, the AI software. That he's a Midjourney artist. And so there ended up being a whole kerfuffle, a big backlash about it. And as far as I know, McFarlane never said anything about it one way or the other. I don't know if the cover was ever published, but whenever basically all this conversation on Facebook and Instagram, people very rightly upset about it, because there was a lot of artists who entered this contest and spent time and effort making artwork that wasn't used, and then this one guy who just put a prompt into Midjourney or whatever got selected, you know.
Yeah.
And so I remember what I caught wind of the story, like I think it was via Facebook, and I go to his Instagram page, and granted, he does say it's Midjourney at the top,
Yeah.
but like scrolling through, dude, it was like a library of prompts that he had done of different
Mm.
things, and like he's posting like 10 things a day, you know,
Yeah. And
and it's just like, what hope do the rest of us have if this
yeah.
is allowed that somebody can just trial and error enter prompts until they get the thing that they want, and like, yeah, I mean, like thankfully it seems like most people are very much against it. You know,
Yeah.
there are the people who like it, there are the people who use it, but I don't personally ever want to buy a comic that's made
No, I would never want that.
not by a person. You know,
But
I don't ever want to watch a movie if they get to the point. I don't ever
no.
want to watch a movie that has an AI actor. You know,
No.
like where
Feels
they just
icky.
pay a person for a day's work, get this person scanned, and turn them into an AI movie star. That's like there's no heart or soul or emotion, you
Right.
know.
But
And
what's
like, I know comics can get a lot of guff, which I mean, comics are much more accepted now than they were when I was younger. You know, it was very, very much frowned upon, back in the 90s or whatnot as being, juvenile or whatever. But like, it's an art form. It's people's souls are being put into these, you know.
yeah.
Like that's the whole thing the other day talking about the level of work, expected out of these top level comic artists. And they're expected to produce this on a monthly schedule.
Yeah.
Like somebody of like the dude that's drawing Ultimate Spider-Man, Mark Chiquetto, I believe is his name,
Hmm.
freaking phenomenal. And if he wasn't drawing comics, if he was doing like still lifes and whatnot, his work would be in museums,
Yeah.
because that's how talented this guy is. Alex Ross, if he, I mean, I know that Alex Ross's stuff has been in museums, so that's probably the worst example I can think of off the. My point is the amount of work, love, effort that these people put into honing their craft,
Mhm.
and the fact that it is by definition art is high
Yeah.
art to me and to many, many other people. And the idea that some jackass is just feeding prompts into some software, some AI software, and then feeding these people's life's work,
Right into some
into
algorithm. Yeah.
something, and just recreating their style as a quote tribute. Yeah, it's
I,
just it's sad. Like I won't say it's sickening, it's gross. It's sad. It is
yeah.
honestly sad to me. You know,
What I think what worries me a lot too is like I've like so I've been trying to write a science fiction book for a long time, and I've on occasion to like for inspiration, I've commissioned artists to write for me. Not I'm saying not write,
right,
draw something for me because I can somewhat draw, but not at that level. And
right,
it's always brought me a lot of inspiration. And I know like these people, they're not people I can afford. We're talking maybe $100, maybe a little bit more for the
right.
commission. So nothing too crazy, but like that's how a lot of people get started is through like doing commissions and
Oh
all
yeah,
that. And like a lot of people do, even when you're like established, still doing commissions,
no,
which is great. And it's like to think that, okay, instead of doing a commission, I'm going in supporting an artist, I'm going to just type a prompt and that I'm going to
no,
be content with that. I could never imagine doing that, you know?
no, no, me neither. But the problem, my worry is the idea that it there will always be exceptions to it. Like, and I think ultimately, like I try to be optimistic,
Yeah.
but like the idea that a next generation going to have a vastly different view of AI in 15, 20
Right.
years because people that are being born now are, kind of getting into the whatever in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
By that point, AI can possibly be so ingrained that, it's kind of like kids that were born, in the late 90s or early 2000s, they've always known the internet, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
And so I know their perspective of how the world is just because they had a different, whatever factors in growing up. I'm curious and worried, and again, my main takeaways is sad,
Yeah.
but like how because I think all of us that were before the AI times, AI's stuff, we're going by and large probably be similar mindsets of it,
Hmm.
but the next generation is coming up where it's their norm, It's
Right.
like, for me, Spider-Man, Batman, these things are my norm. These things
Yeah.
existed before I existed, right? And so to me, there was never a world without these characters. There was never a world without comics, like, you know, probably next 10, 20 years, like movie theaters are going to be phased out, because
Yeah.
it's a thing I love dearly. Going to the theater, I hate watching movies at home.
I love
Too,
going to theater. Yeah.
too many distractions. And this is an argument I have with friends all the time, where like people are like, oh, you have a shitty or you have a bad experience at the theater, something this that tainted on. Like, dude, it's like I can't focus. Like I'm looking at my phone. We got three dogs in the other room.
Yeah.
Like you can pause it. I I
It's
love
good to
going to
have
the
just
theater.
2 hours or 2.5 hours to sit there and
Right.
watch the movie.
And you have no distraction, like the phone's off. Like it's to me, but there's going to be a whole generation of people that are going to be born where
Yeah.
basically theaters still exist, but it's not the staple that it once was, but and it really wasn't even a thought that I had until we were just talking about it. Is like what's going to happen in 15, 20 years with, younger people who AI is their norm. AI has
Yeah.
always been there. And it kind of just depends on really how much we let it slide now, like as
Yeah.
consumers, as a fan base. And like I've been uplifted in the fact that the majority of people seem to be very much against it,
Right.
except for the people who are into it, who are trying to
Right.
figure out a way because they don't have a creative bone in their body. They're trying to figure out a way to use it,
Right. Yeah.
you know,
Exactly.
have that feeling of accomplishing something when they've done nothing.
Yeah.
But and again, like I'm fine with the idea of AI in research and like like curing diseases and
Yeah.
in applicable scientific study and and ways of making technology better, but just keep it the hell away from the
Yeah.
arts,
Exactly.
because
Yeah.
art by design, art by definition is man-made.
Right.
It is it's something that anything you feed into AI was created by people, as far as art goes. And
Mm.
all it can do is replicate. It cannot invent anything new.
Right.
It can just copy, paste. That's all it is.
Mm.
Because it doesn't have emotion. It doesn't have a soul, And like I said, I have no desire to ever buy a product that is not made by people, and it almost
Definitely.
feels absurd, like we're in some Orwellian whatever
Yeah.
even having this conversation,
Yeah. No,
just
it is. Yeah.
just the idea, like because I mean, like Harlan Ellison, all these guys. This seems like something they were written about. Of basically, as a 1984 esque thing of this idea that the arts could be in jeopardy because people have become so indifferent to the mode of how they're being fed their entertainment, that it could even be the possibility that robots, machines, AI are now making the art.
Right.
And again, I try to be really like optimistic. And my optimistic side says that people, by and large, the vast majority
You'll
of
figure it
people
out.
are going to say, no, we don't want this,
Mhm.
and there's been a few times where, artists been busted using AI. Like there was a DC cover artist that got called out on him and they canceled the covers. He was doing like cover for Batman, a cover of Superman and Wonder Woman. And I was like, dude, I would die to have this opportunity, to
Mhm.
be doing any one of these covers. He's doing all three. And this is apparently this was an established dude. And I guess he was like, oh, this is the way I can cut corners, and
Yeah.
then like that was sloppy stuff like the symbol, like the Superman logo on the chest. It didn't look right, Like you look out for
Mhm.
2 seconds, it's like, dude, you didn't think to fix this in Photoshop?
Yeah. You think that'd be important?
You could probably have gotten away with it, or like the extra finger or whatever it is,
Yeah.
Or it's just like, oh, dude, it's just so lazy,
Well,
and then there was the artist that got kicked out of Dragon Con, where
mhm. Oh,
apparently there was somebody trying to sell what they passed off as their own artwork at this past Dragon Con last month, and they were apparently they weren't called and kicked out to the final day because it runs, I think, like Friday through Monday.
Mhm.
So they, unfortunately, the guy had like 3 days at least of sales before they kicked him out. Like,
Oh,
I wish they would have
yeah.
called him the first day. But apparently, they had to call the police to remove him because he started kicking up a fuss because, I guess he felt like he belonged there.
Yeah, no. Well, to help us end on, I guess, like a more optimistic note, let's say there's younger artists that, aren't using AI that want to, do what you're doing and, make comic covers and
Oh, yeah.
illustrate and all that and do commissions and all that. What advice would you have for young artists,
Dude,
aspiring
like it
artists?
is so great today. All the stuff that's like at your disposal with YouTube, with Instagram, Facebook, like all the websites, social media, and stuff. Like stuff I would have killed for as a kid.
Mhm.
That I have access to. God, I remember being like 12, 13 and watching the Sci-Fi Channel and like just like blowing a gasket. Like I was like, oh my God, they were actually talking about comic books.
Mhm.
Because they weren't. I mean, you had like a couple of movies here and there every few years, but by and large, comics weren't in the pop culture like that. And now they are, which is amazing. And now there's all these, tutorials you can follow artists. Ink Pulp is one that my friend Cabby he listens to all the time. He loves them, and they go over like different like art tips and stuff.
Mhm.
They have a great one where they're doing like this highly detailed painting of Green Goblin, and
Oh, that's cool.
they do the start, and it's like a speed run thing, but it looks like Alex Ross level of like finished detail, and they did it like in a couple of hours, and they go through the whole process teaching how they did this. I was like, wow, this is amazing. I wish I had the attention span to watch this whole thing, but sadly I do not. I've watched it in bits and pieces, like I've never actually finished a video. But yeah, I mean, there's so many great, resources out there now. I mean, just YouTube alone, you can watch all this stuff for free. And then, like, also there's easier ways to get it out there. I mean,
Mhm.
with the last 15, 20 years of web comics becoming a big thing, it was a way because I mean, back before web comics, you just had to go either find a small press publisher to publish you,
Yeah.
or you had to self-publish. And that takes money.
Mhm.
Takes the printing takes money, and back in the day, there weren't these print-on-demand places like there are now, where if you want to do a run of a comic, you can go to Kablam, Comics Wellspring, or a local print shop and get 20 copies of your comic printed.
You're right.
Where you're not having to buy like 1,000 copies like back in the day. They didn't have those print on demand type stuff. And then, like with web comics and whatnot, you don't even have to publish in print. You can just do a
Yeah. You
web
can just have
comic.
it online.
And because I mean, there's so many web comics my wife follows where she's been following a person for 5 or 6 years. The person amasses a following doing the online stuff. And then they get big enough a following, they do a Kickstarter and they sell out their book before they've even published it.
Right. Yeah.
And there's just all these ways to get your stuff out there. Social media, posting your art on there. I mean, that's how I got the Upper Deck gig. I just posted my fan art like on Instagram and Facebook, and one of the guys, Upper Deck, I think he reached out through me to me through Instagram, and I was like, oh, cool, yeah, man, this be an awesome
Yeah.
opportunity. So. Doing conventions, it's really hard to find an editor at convention, but like it's a good way to get your work out there. Like
Yeah.
if they're at that step ready to take that step of getting. I mean, there's so many good shows like y'all show, where find something that's local where it doesn't cost an arm and a leg to set up, and that's how we all started. Doing
Yeah.
shows, 15, 20 years ago or whatnot. Is we would just. I mean, I do about 20 something shows a year between North Carolina and South Carolina. So and it's an awesome thing. You meet really cool people.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
I was gonna ask too, as we're getting closer, wrapping up here and getting, Nerd Fest is in a little bit. What's one of your favorite things about setting up at shows?
I mean, honestly, I mean, I've met a lot of really awesome people over the years,
Mhm.
like fellow artists and, vendors, whatnot. I mean, like, it's always great getting the feedback. And, like,
Mhm.
anytime somebody buys your work, you're just like, man, this is awesome.
Yeah,
I mean, like, it's just a great feeling to have somebody light up and sing what you've done,
yeah, yeah.
and support it. It's a cool feeling. And but yeah, I mean, I would definitely have to say. the people I've made. You know, I don't know if that sounds or the people I've met, the friends I've met. I don't know if it sounds corny or not, but it's
No,
honest.
it's true. I mean,
You
I've met a
know,
lot of great
like
dealers, artists,
like
and
honestly, all the people I work with on this, you know, these are people I met through conventions. Ron
right.
Winger, Cabby, Lyle. Actually, I met Lyle online. We're part of a little comic book competition back in like 2007. Then we met right after that at Heroes Con, and he's become one of my best friends in the world. I talk to him almost every day, like on his lunch break. He calls and we're talking about whatever's going on, you know. But you know, Brian Wingrove, you know, the guy that published this, the writer, he's like one of the best people I've ever met. You know, he's just an awesome human being, you know. And it's always just fun, like, you know, whenever, you know, like doing news shows where I haven't met anybody, and by the end of it, you know, because like 99% of the people I meet at shows are honest, you know.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, you'll run into somebody arrogant, you know, somebody that's having a bad day, you know, whatever.
Hmm.
But by and large, it's a Comic Con. People are happy
Right.
at
They're good. They're
Comic Con.
good people there. Yeah.
Like there are the exceptions where somebody's having a bad day, you know, for whatever reason, you know. Maybe they weren't feeling good, maybe something in their life's going on. I don't know, but by and large, you know, the people I've met over the last 15 years, you know, have just been amazing.
Yeah.
Like I look forward to all the new people I get to meet doing this, you know. So
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to see you at Nerd Fest. It's
uh,
on the 11th, so I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
yeah,
It's going to be a
yeah,
lot of great vendors,
yeah,
artists, all the
yeah,
folks,
yeah.
food trucks.
Yeah, I was at their first one this, when was that? Back in March or April?
Yeah, back in March. Yeah,
March, yeah, and I had
it's
a
hard to
great
believe.
time.
Yeah, it's flown by.
Yeah, so
So
but when I think they mentioned that they were going to be doing one later in the year, I was like, yep, just let me know when. I'll be back. I had a great time. So
yeah,
yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. So
awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come talk about art. I'm glad we got to focus mainly on the good art. I know we talked we went on a little rant about AI art, which is not art, but I'm
right,
excited for people to see your real awesome art. I've seen your stuff before, and then obviously like last couple of days as I'm preparing, just looking through
right.
your Instagram, your website, just
Thanks a
you're a
lot, man.
really awesome artist, man. It's so cool. I can see all the artists that you've mentioned being influenced by. I can see them in your art. So that's just so cool, man.
Thanks a lot, Tyler. I appreciate that, man.
Yep. And again, we'll see you then pretty soon here at Nerdfest. So
Yeah,
thanks
man.
again, Chris.
All right, thank you, man. Really
All
looking
right.
forward to it. So,
Yeah. Talk to you later.
all right, man.
Yay, comics!